Seeing none, I'm going to move on to item 2 on the agenda. This is in response to actually a question, simple but elegant question that John Mullen put to us last time. What is these things? What do they do? Wow, what's inside the black box? So I wanted to try to make sure, because I think that's a very important question going forward for contact, to answer that. And to help do that, we have the benefit of having with us Kurose from UMass, who is in the computer science department and has helped me review our computers together.
Okay, all yours. So I'm going to use PowerPoint. I hope that's okay. So I'm a faculty member at UMass, and it's a horrible time to teach because it's the end of the day, and especially in the darkened room. So I hope this goes okay. So actually, Eric Nakajima called me last week and said, would I be happy to talk about what is high-performance computing? So of course I said, absolutely yes. And he had asked me the same question, I think, last spring. After we had several meetings about high-performance computing, he sent me an email and says, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I'm not quite sure what high-performance computing really is, so could I help him out a little bit? So I sent him a one-page Word document, sort of what I thought it was about. And then I heard John Mullen, who at our last meeting asked exactly the same question. So hopefully I can answer both of those questions at the same time. Okay, so what is HPC? Just a very simple definition. There's nothing magic about it, right? Just think about what you can do with one computer and the kinds of problems you can solve with a computer. HPC is really nothing more than taking large clusters of computers. I mean, almost literally the same kinds of basic chips and things like that we have in our laptops here, and using hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them, all in concert to solve a particular problem. And I'll give you some examples of that in a second. So it's really using clusters of computers, which is sort of more of a modern trend, or you probably heard the word supercomputers used a lot. So these are sort of very more special purpose computers. You might have heard of IBM's Blue Gene, much more specialized architecture, specialized computer you get in the box, to solve problems in computing applications that it would just take way too long to solve it on my laptop. We'd all not be here anymore. Okay? Now, Susan Rockfield, the president of MIT, is fond of saying that HPC is the third leg of science and engineering. And I wanted to just comment on that a little bit, and then I'll give you some examples of HPC. So what does Susan mean when she talks about that? So if you're in science or engineering, there are basically 3 ways you can approach a problem. You can do theory. So there's E equals MC squared, which all of these probably heard of. Anybody major in physics or study physics in high school? Okay, so I should ask if anybody out there recognizes Maxwell's equations in integral form. But these are a bunch of equations that talk about how electromagnetic waves propagate. And this is a Navier-Stokes equation over here that talks about how when fluids flow through volumes, how they can split and churn and things like that. So these are equations, we think of these as things we write down on paper and we can solve them. So that's sort of theory. There's experimentation that scientists do. Also, there's sort of small lab bench things in here. So I'm a computer scientist, not a chemist or a biologist, so I just think there are chemicals there. There's a microscope there to look at cells and things like that. This is a picture of the Large Hadron Super Collider that you might have heard of in Switzerland. And this is just a little itty part of the picture is too small for you to see anything. But we build apparatus, we study nature, we study the things that we build using these, probably apparati is the word, or apparatus, whatever the word is. So we have theory, we have experimentation, and we have computation. Okay, and what do we mean by having computation as a sort of way of sort of studying things? And what I mean by this, and then I'll give you 2 examples, is that rather than observing it in real life, or rather than writing some equations about how things govern, or how the operation or how nature operates, what we do is we write computer programs that will model, that will simulate what would happen in the real world. And then, in the case of supercomputing, we have racks and racks and racks of these computers because the problems that we're going to be looking at are complex. And we understand how something like a cell divides, or how a storm evolves over time, or what the airflow is around a turbine blade, or something like that, by modeling that and studying it. You've probably seen pictures of when cars are designed, how the aerodynamics are looked at. They're actually studied through simulation before you actually build them and try them out in aircraft. So that may still be a little bit vague, so let me just show you two examples, and I brought a couple of movies along here also about some real examples of HPC. And the first one that I'll go through here, just one slide each, is protein folding. So I won't ask how many people major in biology. So the way to think of this is the following, right? You know, a protein begins in a cell as a long sequence of amino acids. Okay, so think of this, so a whole sequence of these things. Think of it as one big string when it's created. Now before that protein can do anything useful in your body, it does what's called folding. So think of a spring, for instance, you stretch out, and then all of a sudden you let it go, and it coils and does all this kind of stuff, and it goes into some form, and then when it's in that form, it can do useful things. The protein can move around within the cell and within the body and do useful things. So a protein begins, it's formed in a cell, it's just this sort of unformed sequence of amino acids, and then over a very short microseconds, periods of time, in your body, it folds and it turns into something that's functional that your body can actually use. Okay. Now, John, you can ask questions anytime. Actually, anybody can ask questions anytime. And I didn't bring any blue books, so there are no tests or anything afterwards. Okay? So, now, you might say, okay, well, that's nice. Is that sort of theoretically nice? But in fact, understanding protein folding is absolutely fundamental to lots and lots of things. So, for example, protein misfolding has been linked to Alzheimer's disease, mad cow disease, and a number of other diseases. That's to say, misfolded proteins are found in people, parts of the body where we have these kinds of diseases. When you design drugs, how flexible a protein like that is and how proteins can dock with each other is really important in drug delivery systems and understanding how drugs are going to interact with the body. So this is a very fundamental process, sort of understanding how this happens. Tons and tons of healthcare, life sciences applications here. And the question is, how can we understand this? So let me show you a little movie over here, and I'll just talk over it as it goes on. So what you're going to see is a folded protein. So here's the folded protein. Now remember, we start off with this sort of stringy thing over here. So here's a stringy thing right here. This is a computer simulation of protein folding now. And here are all the different states that this protein is going through in the process of 6 microseconds, in this particular case, to go from this kind of a chain to this kind of final folded state. And understanding that, being able to predict what the folded structure is, and then being able to use this is, again, very important in these kinds of applications. Now, how's HPC used here? Think of now these long sequences of molecules that have forces. Think of some parts of the molecules are attracted to each other, others repel. And so you have this strain, and then all of these forces are interacting with each other. We simulate that in the computer over time, and finally come up with the folded structure. So that's one example of high-performance computing. Let me give you one other example, actually not closer to home, because I'm going to give you an example in Oklahoma, but you'll see why it's closer to home in a second. So, we all love the weather. And the weather is actually something that, while we can't, I shouldn't make it a public statement.